The international seminar promoted by the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, in Buenos Aires began in Argentina with various calls for unity and integration. Mexico's Undersecretary of Human Rights, Alejandro Encinas Rodriguez, said the disappearance of the 43 students of Ayotzinapa was a state crime, where members of the 3 levels of government are responsible. Sudanese protesters have taken to the streets of Khartoum, demanding a return to civilian rule after last year's military coup. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Thursday, the international seminar promoted by the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, opened in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with various calls for unity and integration. The 35th edition was attended by authorities such as the former presidents of Uruguay, José Mujica, of Colombia, Ernesto Samper, and the former Prime Minister of the Spanish government, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. The main theme of the seminar is the institutional strengthening of CELAC as the only regional integration mechanisms that brings together all the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean without exclusions. Likewise, participants highlighted the importance of integration for the organization to play a systematic and strategic role in the world.
We have to change the multilateral system, and the multilateral system of the future is not going to be like the current scheme of a board of directors of a Security Council that they won in the Second World War, and of an assembly of people who say a lot without being taken seriously. But it will have to be a much more dynamic system formed by blocks. We are going to go towards multilateral system by blocks. There is the Asian, African, European bloc. But nowadays, there could not be the Latin American bloc because we are not unified as a bloc, because we are not behaving as a bloc. Integration has never been as important as it is at this moment in the region, and we have never been so disintegrated as we are at this moment.
Former President of Uruguay, José Pepe Mujica, said that the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean must be achieved jointly by all the countries.
This is not a cause of left, center, or right. It is a cause of being or not being. We have to be clear about this, because if we atomize ourselves and do not realize that we have to defend a common interest, the only thing we are going to do is to vulgarize ourselves. And if we are going to wait until we have strategic agreement with the value of the property, we are going to integrate in the year of a goalkeeper. We have to accept reality, and we have to fight and integrate with what we have. Therefore, we have to be open and flexible.
Also, during the seminar, the Mexican President, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, urged the United States via video conference to abandon hegemonic policies and not to interfere in the internal affairs of the countries.
We have to convince the governments of Canada and the United States. They have to change their policies of domination,
de predominio, de hegemonía, de querer intervenir en los asuntos internos,
of wanting to intervene in the internal affairs of other nations. That policy has to change.
Obsoleta.
An obsolete policy.
Los golpes de Estado, el que se respete la soberanía de los países.
The coup. They have to respect the country's sovereignties. They should think that we need each other and that we can become much stronger as a region in the world.
Now we move on to other topics. The government of Venezuela denounced that the recent fire in a medical supply warehouse in Caracas was caused by extremist forces. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez detailed with evidence that the incident where medical supplies for the hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis programs were stored was the result of sabotage provoked by anti-political Venezuelan factors. The high official specified that the investigation continues to determine accountability and stressed these actions affect the Venezuelan people. According to photographic records, the authorities determined that the attackers used fuel in at least 5 points of ignition. And the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, denounced the attack on the Social Security office in the city of Caracas, stating that groups related to the former Colombian government, presided by Iván Duque, were involved in the attack.
Look at what happened with the Social Security warehouse, which was denounced today by our Executive Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez. This is how their campaign will be in 2024. This is how their policy has been. A group is in charge of terrorism and of doing damage. A group is in charge of putting bombs, of killing, of attacking the electric system, of attacking the gas pipeline, etc. They are groups that were trained in Colombia in the time of Iván Duque, and they are all over the place. In Iván Duque's time, these terrorist groups were formed in Colombia.
The head of state also denounced that the terrorist attacks that the Social Security Health Center received only harmed Venezuelan people.
The one who puts the bomb, who could he be hurting? Who are they hurting by burning the medicines of the real patients who urgently need them? They're hurting who? Maduro? They're hurting the sick people. They're hurting the family and the community. That is why these people will never, ever return to power in Venezuela. They will never return. They will never return. They will never return, ever.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The National Assembly of Venezuela appointed Felix Plasencia as the new ambassador to Colombia as part of the process of restoring normal relations between both countries. In an extraordinary session described as historic, the Venezuelan parliament unanimously authorized Plasencia after the Legislative Foreign Policy Committee analyzed his credentials. The legislative body ratified the importance of re-establishing relations with Colombia, considering it vital for both nations. Venezuelan ambassador to Colombia, Felix Plasencia, reiterated his commitment to re-establish bilateral relations with Bogotá and for the welfare of both nations.
Our Bolivarian commitment of fraternal good relations with our neighbors, with such a fundamental neighbor. We are the same people, the Bolivarian homeland, our Colombian homeland. We assume with responsibility, I assume with humility and responsibility, the commitment that President of the Republic, Nicolás Maduro Moros, has instructed me. The people of Venezuela are now here in the company of the deputies elected by the Venezuelan people, by the National Assembly, to discuss the work path that will be carried out with responsible commitment, with our Venezuelan and Bolivarian commitment.
In this context, the Venezuelan ambassador pointed out that talks with Colombia will soon begin to discuss the various issues on the bilateral agenda.
I believe that as of today, we will have plenty of time to talk. Soon we will meet and we will discuss the issues that are on the agenda, the historic agenda that we must retake, and the agenda that we must build in this new wonderful reality that we celebrate with the government of Gustavo Petro and the Bolivarian commitment, the commitment of the leadership of Nicolás Maduro from Venezuela. We are soon going to talk in depth about all the issues that concern us and that are important in the bilateral agenda of our countries. And from here, with this commitment, I insist, with that Bolivarian commitment, our projection to the Caribbean, South America, and the world.
Mexico's Undersecretary of Human Rights, Alejandro Encinas Rodriguez, said the disappearance of the 43 students of Ayotzinapa was a state crime, where members of the 3 levels of government are responsible. The parents of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa students met with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and the federal authorities at the National Palace to learn about the progress in the investigations 3 years after the beginning of the activities of the Commission for Truth and Access to Justice in the case, headed by Alejandro Encinas Rodriguez, Undersecretary for Human Rights, Population and Migration. At the end of the meeting, the federal official gave an extensive press conference in which he presented an extensive report with conclusions that point to the Mexican state as responsible for the disappearance and the murder of both the 43 students as well as 6 other people related to the case.
The creation of the historical truth was a concerted action of the organized mechanism of power from the highest level of government that concealed the facts, altered the crime scene, hid the links of authorities with the criminal group, and the participation of state agents, security forces, and authorities responsible for the administration of justice in the disappearance of the students. In short, it was a state crime.
During the press conference held at the National Palace, Alejandro Encinas Rodriguez said that the investigation remains open and that there are legal requirements to continue the search for those responsible.
There are sufficient elements for the Attorney General's office to initiate or continue the inquiries to determine the responsibilities of the 33 persons that we have pointed out as responsible and that are currently under the corresponding judicial proceedings.
We move on to other topics. Colombian President Gustavo Petro asked on Wednesday for a truce by the armed groups so that public forces may deal with the consequences of the rainy season. During a visit to Villavicencio, a city near Bogotá, the president launched his proposal to the organizations with which he is exploring agreements of surrendering in exchange for criminal benefits. Petro framed his proposal in view of the forecast of a strong winter season in the coming months because of the weather phenomenon La Niña in the Pacific Ocean, which entails heavy rainfall. On their part, the National Liberation Army, the ELN, issued a communique saying they have released 6 soldiers and policemen as a unilateral humanitarian gesture and that they welcome the government's desire for peace. In Uruguay, high school students in Montevideo call on the national student body to pressure the executive branch to increase budget allocations to the sector. The events occur within the framework of the demands of different educational unions who reject the reforms to the sector proposed by the government of Luis Lacalle. During the last few weeks, students have occupied various educational and teacher training centers in the interior of the country, as well as the National Teachers Center in rejection of the executive's measures.
Organized students of high school number 12 of the Hector Miranda Institute, we took the measure of occupying the institution demanding an instance of negotiation with the corresponding authorities. We are outraged by the way in which the authorities ignore our claims. The voice and vote of a student's body become null before the decisions that are taken regarding educational policies. The education of the people is not sold, it is defended. We will not postpone even one more day the claims for the deplorable building conditions in which we study.
For a year, we have seen how enrollment has increased, and if we don't have teachers and staff, classrooms that can respond to the demand, that we celebrate the demand that more and more children of workers have access to a university with quality education. But if there is no space to meet that, it is really at risk to think about the country beyond today, about how we are going to develop a productive country with social justice that meets the demands of the popular field. So that is what we are talking about when we say it is at risk.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Sudanese protesters have taken to the streets in Khartoum, demanding a return to civilian rule after last year's military coup. Protesters were seen in the capital Khartoum carrying Sudanese flags and chanting "No, no to military rule," and "Civilian rule is the people's choice." Sudan has been rocked by near-weekly protests and violent crackdowns that has so far left at least 116 people dead since the army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a military coup last October. The takeover has disrupted the transition to civilian rule launched after the ouster in 2019 of three-decade strongman Omar al-Bashir. And Belen Simon, the spokesperson for the Ethiopian Prime Minister's office, says that the government wants to start ceasefire talks with the rebel authorities in the Tigray region. Ethiopian Prime Minister's office spokesperson Belen Simon also says they are dealing with a very vocally belligerent and illegally armed group operating at zone when refusing to accept peace talks. The federal government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels have been saying they are ready to negotiate for several weeks, but no talks have begun as the two sides differ of several issues, including safety guarantees for federal officials providing basic services in the war-stricken northern region. Now we move on to other topics. At least 38 people have died and several dozen were injured in the forest fires that affected 14 departments in northern Algeria, reviving the specter of the summer of 2021, the deadliest in the country's modern history. Several people suffered burns or breathing difficulties, but no new official figure was given on the number of injured. According to local media, more than 350 families fled their homes in South Harras. The gendarmerie closed several roads because of the fires. These fires revived wounds and the debate of the lack of water bomber aircraft in sufficient numbers, which had already agitated the country last summer. The warming climate increases the likelihood of heat waves and droughts and, in turn, fires. Spanish authorities reported that the forest fire in the Valencian community is moving southwards and has so far consumed nearly 13,000 hectares. The outbreaks caused by the winds are being dealt with the air and land. The president of the Generalitat Valenciana, Ximo Puig, asked for prudence and patience to the 1,500 neighbors evicted since the fire is not perimeter nor stabilized. The local authorities are keeping most of the accesses to the affected area closed to minimize the risk of injuries. The heat wave and the intense drought have caused dozens of forest fires in Europe during the last months. In Europe, high gas demand due to high temperatures is the main cause of soaring electricity tariffs. A study by the European analytics firm Rystad Energy revealed that electricity tariffs are impacted by the falling productivity of wind power plants, which currently contribute 9.1% of supply, in contrast to the planned range of between 11 and 20%, while the gas imports from Moscow and Kiev through the Nord Stream pipeline remain limited. At its annual peak, electricity in the United Kingdom costs as much as €486 per megawatt, while in Germany, France, and Italy it exceeded €500. And now we address other topics. During his visit to Ukraine, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the world needs the crops of this region to face the global food crisis. The diplomat pointed out on Thursday that there is no solution to the food crisis unless full world access to products and fertilizers for Moscow and Kiev is guaranteed, and also said during his meeting with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan that more than 20 ships have left Ukrainian ports and another 15 from Istanbul bound for Ukraine to load food since the agreement on Ukraine was closed. Erdogan said that he intends to inform Russian President Vladimir Putin about the results of the meeting. TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters that you see on the screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now, more than ever, the world connects to us, and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media for all the latest news. You are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. And now you can also follow us on TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.